Welcome to the How It All Works podcast. We are a podcast with a purpose. We bring in dynamic playmakers from vital industries and have them sit down and discuss what makes their industry run. From election officials to first responders, from producers and artists to builders and tradesmen, we are here to learn what makes these industries run and give credit to the invaluable people who do the hard work every day. Thank you for joining us today. Time to introduce our guest. Matt Herriman, a lifelong Tennessee, is a realtor and government relations consultant. Prior to his transition to real estate, Matt worked alongside Governor Bill Lee on his legislative team before moving on to oversee 4 states for the National Rifle Association. Matt values family, faith, ethics, and relationships, building his career on trust and integrity. Matt currently resides in Murfreesboro with his wife Morgan and their 3 children, Judah, Isaiah, and Nora. Welcome in, Matt. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Phil.
So, we're going to be talking about local elections today, which I'm super excited because it's something that really gets passed over a lot. And not a lot of people, in my opinion, know enough about what's going on in their hometown. And that's kind of scary to a certain extent because, Murfreesboro is we're not a big town. We're not a small town either. And we're talking about millions and millions of dollars that are being thrown around for a lot of different things. And people really have no clue who's supposed to be accountable for all that. And they have no clue how these elections and how these things are supposed to work. But before we really get into all that, I want to talk about you and kind of talk about what led you, what led you into that space and how you arrived there.
Sure. Well, so for me, my granddad is kind of my hero. And kind of a role model for me. I grew up in a small rural town in West Tennessee called Bolivar.
Okay.
Kind of between Memphis and Jackson, about 6,000 people, really small. And my granddad owned a real estate and auction company, very active in the community. He also was very active in local politics. For decades, Hardeman County, which is where I'm from, it's the county in West Tennessee, was like deep blue county. My granddad was very conservative. And so it wasn't very popular in Bolivar or Hardeman County to be Republican, but I followed him to lots of different events. I mean, some of my earliest memories of, they had the field trials where they had where they'd run the bird dogs. That happens in my community over in West Tennessee. And I remember as people came in to watch that, slapping Lamar Alexander stickers on people. That was like 2002. I was like, 10 or 11 years old. And so from an early age, it was kind of instilled in me that you're active in your community, you give back to your community, local decisions and things matter. So kind of fast forward, in high school, I got to go to D.C. for the first time as a 15-year-old. And I think that was where it really kind of began to spark, like, I enjoy being involved and active in this world, so to speak. And so when I went off to college, to UT Knoxville, just became more active, interned for U.S. Senator Bob Corker. Ended up getting to intern at the state legislature back in 2012. And really, so much of what I've gotten to do, I really point back to relationships and folks that I met during that time. Immediately following that time as an intern in the legislature, worked for a lady named Deborah Maggart, who was the Republican caucus leader at the time. I guess that was really like my first paid campaign that I'd ever done. I'd volunteered on Governor Haslam's 2010 gubernatorial race because he was mayor of Knoxville and I was in school there, and just kind of stayed active in campaigns. Actually, worked for Jim Tracy right out of college. He was running for Congress at the time here in Murfreesboro. Obviously, he lost, and I actually went into ministry for about 3 years, was kind of a college pastor, worked for the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission, which is kind of the public policy arm of the Southern Baptist Convention, for a brief time before going and doing a little financial plan. I've just done all kinds of silly things. And during that time was when I reconnected with a guy named Shane Reeves, who folks here in Rutherford County would know. And about that time, Jim Tracy got appointed by Trump to be the director of basically the U.S. Department of Ag for Tennessee. Vacated his Senate seat. Shane asked me to come run the Senate seat or Senate race. Obviously, he was successful in that, so I went to work for, I'm going really fast here, but Lieutenant Governor called and asked me to oversee all the reelection campaigns for the state Senate Republican caucus, that 18 cycle. And by virtue of doing that, I got to know a guy named Blake Harris, who was the general consultant for a guy named Bill Lee that cycle.
Never heard of that guy.
Yeah, and so Blake and I became fast friends, and kind of fast forward. Obviously, Bill Lee won. Blake asked me to join the transition team, and then ultimately the administration. And I was having a heck of a time. I'm a lifelong Tennessean. Here I was, in the governor's office, being able to make a difference for, 6.5, 7 million Tennesseans on a daily basis. And Blake called me one night in, I guess, September and was like, "You want to go work for the NRA?" And I was like, "Well, that sounds interesting." And so it's covering 3 states. At the time, I had 2 kids, and so it's going to make a lot more money than working for the state. And so I went to work for the NRA, covering 4 states for them: Tennessee, Arkansas, Mississippi, and Louisiana. And I did that for about 3.5 years, or a little less than 3.5 years. Got my real estate license during that time. Also spent some time working for a charter school organization, and have really spent the last, I guess, year being more focused on real estate.
Yeah, I'm familiar with the charter school. That's where my son goes. So
that's right.
Yeah,
I think that's where we first kind of met. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, when NEI was looking to use Blackman Baptist, when they were looking to use their property, I was at the meeting with the city council that day, and it was, if anybody watching has ever seen Parks and Rec, and you see their meetings with like where they bring all the people into the gymnasium, and that's honestly what it felt like. And Matt handled it very well, but I was incredibly shocked at some of the things that people were saying. It was
that
crazy.
The county commission meeting?
It was the one we did at the historic courthouse.
Yes, yeah, that was it. That was like the planning commission meeting.
When Kevin was there.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Some people from our church.
I remember that.
I was absolutely blown away at just the response from the neighborhood, and I kind of felt bad at the same time.
Yeah,
but that was a whole interesting situation.
Yeah,
and what really set people off was, I don't know who did that drawing, where it was like you have the Blackman property and it goes straight back, right?
Yeah.
And they had basically just done a drawing where this one house on the side just gets completely demolished. So they have a drive, so the church can have a drive going out for like, and Pastor Kevin from the start was like, "We have nothing to do with this.
Yeah.
Like, we don't know who did this. We don't know how they did it. We don't know why they did it. We did not ask for this." And people were still losing their minds over it.
Yeah.
And rightfully, like if somebody just, put a drawing of just, "Hey, we're just going to put a driveway through my front yard," I'd be a little upset too. But it's like, okay, at some point you got to start to like have some reason about you.
Yeah.
So that was really, really interesting. Yeah, that was the first time I'd ever met you there. So you went to UTK?
I did.
Is that where you met your wife?
I actually met her when I moved here after college.
Okay.
I started going to New Vision Baptist Church right after that, and we met kind of, at the time it was called the college age ministry, and they like defined it as like 18 to 25. So I was like, all right, I fit in that category, and so that's how we met, was through that ministry. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, that was exactly how I met my wife too, except my mom introduced us. Like we were literally, they called it the singles ministry at the little Baptist church we were going to in Colorado.
That's great.
And I was just, but that's a whole nother story. We're not here to talk about me. So you've done a lot with state, local, and have you done anything with federal elections at all?
I mean, I guess besides the congressional campaign that I worked when Jim Tracy ran, I guess that's really kind of the only congressional race that I've been a part of. Obviously, I did work for Senator Corker in his Knoxville office, so got a little bit of a taste of, I guess the federal government side of things in that role.
Okay. So obviously, you've got your local, your county elections, you've got your state elections, and then your federal elections. Those are all going to be different in some way, shape, form, or fashion.
Yeah.
I know it's kind of funny to me. The state actually has regulations on local elections, and then local elections also kind of have their own regulations as well. So kind of a form and function, purpose, intent versus practice. What's kind of the difference that we see between like state and your county elections? Obviously, statewide elections are much bigger. There's probably a lot more funding, a lot more media attention. How does that look though overall?
Yeah, I mean, I think the issues are different. Oftentimes the timing is different. A lot of times local elections are held earlier in the year. I know, like for the county, in practice, so to speak. I think like our primaries are like in May.
Oh wow!
And then the general ends up being in August, which is how it just happened. So we just had the August primary, and so a lot of our local elections the primaries had happened back in like May, and then the general election matched the state primary back in August.
Okay.
And so then here, obviously in November, we'll have the general election. So those are some differences, and I know there's been some talk, of folks trying to shift that to drive turnout higher, because let's face it, turnout is terrible, period. I mean, really, no matter when it is. But when you put kind of an election off by itself in a random month like May, you have even lower turnout. And so I know there's been discussion about how you could match those up to drive turnout higher. So that's kind of how they look in practice, I guess. And then, I think issues to some degree are different at the state level than they are even at the local level, but not as drastic of a jump from like local to federal.
Yeah.
Where there's a big difference in as far as the issues go.
Okay. I'm trying to think of the right way to ask this. So, here in Tennessee, we're a very Republican state across the board. We've got some
Right.
blue counties kind of spattered throughout. So on the state side and the local side, when you've got, a particular, voting block, that base where you're, whether it's, hey, I'm running for mayor of Rutherford County, or hey, I'm running for governor of Tennessee. When you have one party that is so in control of that area, what does that look like, versus a federal election where you have a lot, where it's more closer to a 50-50 split?
Sure.
What does that look like? Is it much more relying on, like, let's say you're a Republican who's running for mayor of Rutherford County, right? And it's like, okay, if I know if I win the primary, then I'm good. Like, how does all that work?
Yeah, I mean, it obviously varies county to county. I mean, it's interesting if you look. I think Trump won Rutherford County in 16, like 65-35. From 16 to 20, it dropped a whole 10 percentage points. He won Rutherford 55-45 then. And so, obviously, I guess, from the candidate's perspective, I don't know how much, maybe their strategy is going to change. Maybe they're not going to talk, a lot of people talk about red meat issues. So maybe they're not going to beat their chest about a bunch of red meat issues if they're in a county that is trending or, looking a little more purple, so to speak. Certainly not going to talk about, if you're running in Davidson County as a Republican, pretty much dead on arrival there. But, in some counties where, the makeup is a little different, then you're probably not going to, talk as much about like red meat issues of like, and then when I say red meat issues, I'm talking like social issues that get people really riled up that, maybe aren't that big of an issue on the local level. Like, the county level officials and even like city level officials don't really have a say on abortion laws, or immigration laws, or gun laws, or those types of things. But they, in a campaign to motivate people, they may talk about those issues, even though they have no say so in them. necessarily.
Once again, if you have not seen Parks and Rec, they do a really good job of satirizing how that works and how that looks, and it's absolutely hilarious. It is. I'm not trying to plug that show, but it is. As far as some of the election issues where people are just bringing up the most off the wall things when people are running for city council, it's absolutely hilarious. I don't know if you've seen it, but highly recommend because you'll get a good laugh out of it, especially with your experience now. So you ran for city council.
I did.
That did not go as you hoped.
Nope.
Sorry about that. You had my vote.
That's how it goes.
I voted for you. But that was interesting because I know it was the day before the election. You had somebody come and grab your yard sign out of your yard or something. I remember seeing that. That was a whole kind of a funny thing.
Yeah.
Or at least I guess now we can look back on it and laugh a little bit.
Yes, absolutely.
But so what was that experience like for you? Having been a campaign manager, having worked in, all these different elections at all these different levels, so now finally you're the candidate.
Yeah.
You're the one under the microscope. How does that feel?
It was very different. And I remember a few times during the campaign from, I guess, like April to August, calling Shane Reeves, who is truly a mentor of mine, but I obviously ran his campaign and apologizing to him for the hard time I would give him when he would come to me and gripe about this or that or say this or that. And I'm like, you just need to get over it. And I'm like, now I totally understand what was going on up here. So yeah, I mean, it was kind of an out of body, just surreal thing to have your name plastered all over town. And, it was a very vulnerable position to be in. I don't know, it was a completely unfamiliar territory, but it was still, I've never been a candidate before, so it was something different. And so I'm not ready to say I'll do it again, but I do think I grew in that experience and certainly learned some things. And I think, the greatest thing from my wife is from Murfreesboro. And so I think for us, when we kind of reflected on the experience, we looked back and just said, what an amazing community we have. Not just we like us that live here, but my family and I, of people around us at our church and neighborhood and friends and the whole 9 yards, who just came around us and loved us and came and held signs with us places and showed up in the heat of July and sat at early voting locations and then obviously on August 1st. And so I think that was the biggest takeaway for us is like, man, we're really blessed because of, who the Lord's put around us.
So I want to dive a little more into that. So kind of the process, the shows how it all works.
Yeah.
So we want to dive into that process a little more. So take us through what led you ultimately like, I think I can make a difference here. And I think this is where the Lord wants me. We're talking about that decision to, hey, I want to run for city council. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I guess sometime around the end of last year, I'd had something. I feel like because of what I've done, people have always said, like, when are you going to run for office? And I think probably 10 years ago, early, mid-20s, that was like something really early 20s that like consumed me. And so really finally the Lord kind of reoriented priorities of mine. And so it was just like, it'll happen when it happens. And, I'm just going to be where my feet are and serve and give back. And if the opportunity presents itself, then great. And so I guess sometime last year, early this year, in conversations with some friends and family about it, and obviously Shane, who's a mentor of mine, and Jim Tracy and some folks that I'd worked for, and a couple friends I still keep up with in the governor's office, just kind of tossed it out there. And then I guess sometime in February, I convened some of those people I've mentioned, and my wife and some close friends who don't even really, aren't involved in politics, but obviously I wanted a few different perspectives at the table, and we got together at an office and just talked about the good, the bad, the ugly, the pros, the cons, the whole deal, and I think ultimately, for me, faith is really important to me. And so one of the things that I did, which is kind of what I often do, just my personal walk, is I made a list of about 7 or 8 things And you could argue that 3 or 4 of those I had control over, but there were the other half that I really had no control over. And I said, okay, Lord, if you want me to walk through this door and go down this path, then I need you to check every single one of these boxes. And they did. And so, so I ended up, part of how it all works is you go down to the election commission, you pull a petition to run for office, and you have to have at least 25 signatures. Obviously, you get more, especially with running for city council, because some people may have their address may say Murfreesboro, but they may not actually live within city limits. And so if they didn't live within city limits, they couldn't vote for me. So they, their name would get booted. And so, I think I ended up with like 50 signatures. And then you turn it back in, and, it's kind of off to the races from there.
So when you signed up to do that, were you running as a part of a political party? Were you running as an independent? How did you go about? Because campaigning at any level is not cheap. I mean, I know how much some of those signs on the side of the road cost, and people you see people kind of throw them in the trash. I'm like, oh,
yeah,
I know they can't be returned, but hold on, those are expensive. Like just getting the design and everything done and all that, like it's not cheap.
Right.
So how did that work for you? Getting, were you funding it out of your own pocket? Did you have, was there some financiers behind you? Like, how did that work?
Yeah. So one of the boxes that I wanted to check was getting to work with a lady named Rachel Barrett. She's bar none the best Republican fundraiser in the state of Tennessee. Obviously had no business helping on a city council race with what she's done. I mean, she's, I think in 2012 was like Romney's Southeast United States fundraiser. Like she's done a lot of great things, worked for a lot of, statewide candidates, congressional candidates, state level candidates. But I've done several different races with Rachel. And so we had a relationship. And so I called her up and was like, will you help me raise money? And she said yes. To my surprise, that was one of the ones that I knew I didn't have control over, because Rachel's a go-getter, very type A. I knew the load that she was going to have from April to August with some of her clients that had competitive August primaries, and so for her to say yes meant a lot. And so got her on board, and so she really helped drive a lot of that as far as getting me a list of historical donors, and particularly for Rutherford County and Murfreesboro. And so, that's kind of where I started. I started with friends and family and people that I knew. I just got my phone out and started scrolling and like, okay, I think this person might give, that person might give. And we did a fundraiser like at the end of May. So pretty, right about the time the campaign needed to get started. And so there was a combination of raising money, and we raised, I don't know, around 45, 50,000. I probably, after it was all said and done with, put another 10 to 15 of my own into it. And I felt strongly about if I was going to do that and ask people for money, really what I paid for were kind of like what I considered like infrastructure type things, like things you kind of have to have, which was signs, signpost, T-shirts, some other like.
Was there a hat? I didn't get a hat.
No hats. Oh. Didn't do any hats.
That's a shame. That's a shame. I would have had one. I had one from when Kevin Wax ran for register. I've got it sitting, hanging up on the wall at the house. Yeah, that's unfortunate. That's another one that didn't make it quite there. But yeah. So when you were running for city council, because city council, if I, walk me through this. There's 7 people on the city council. Is that correct?
If you count the mayor, yes.
Okay. And that overturns every 2, 4. Do they completely overturn every time there's an election? How does that work?
Good question. So there's, like you said, 7, including the mayor. So he's, this 7th kind of acting council member. But our council's all at large, which means the whole entire city votes for all 6 members, 7 including the mayor of the council. And they're 4-year terms, and they stagger 3 and 3. So when I just ran 3 of the incumbents were up this time, or 3 of the seats were up this time, and then in 2 years a different set will be up. So
so it's 4-year term overturns 3 every 2 years.
that's right.
And that's on even numbered years.
That's right.
Okay.
Exactly.
So once again, with this being such a Republican dominated area, is there any sort of a primary for that? I get it. It's a local, so it's really not, not a lot of people are even running to begin with. But is there any sort of a primary, anything like that for the parties? How does that work?
So our local elections are actually not all local, but for the most part, I think it's still city elections across the state are not bipartisan, they're nonpartisan.
Okay.
So you essentially have to run as an independent for those races, which I found it makes it a little bit challenging, honestly. Not that, I wear my Republican card on my sleeve, so to speak. But I found most people's first question to me was, are you Republican or Democrat? A lot of people will say, well, it doesn't matter at the local level what if you're Republican or Democrat. But I would argue, just to some degree, I think they're right. But I would argue it really does matter, because what's really driving, that is a belief system. And so I think it really matters in how you make decisions, whether you affiliate with a party or not, or an ideology really behind Republicanism. And being a Democrat is a liberal set of ideas or conservative set of ideas and ideals. And so for me, I felt like, obviously my background, I'm strongly conservative, and so I think those things matter. But I also found that so did other people think they mattered to some degree, because oftentimes, I'd say 7 times out of 10 when I was talking to somebody, that was their first question.
So with, obviously, we've mentioned it several times, and I'm probably going to keep hammering this home. Like, we live in a very Republican dominated area. One of the things that I think a lot of people don't necessarily understand about political parties is, just like how you have Parliament in the UK, and there's 15 to 20 different political parties associated in Parliament, and you're trying to get a coalition government going. A lot of people don't understand it's kind of the same with our political parties. There's different factions within each party. Republicans, you've got populists, you've got war hawks, you've got Christian conservatives, you've got a lot of different factions, and those are kind of the big 3 that people hear about a lot. And those so that you kind of have to bring those people together. You kind of got those Trumpian populists. You've got kind of your George Bush types, your legacy Republicans, and then you've got kind of your more libertarian leaning, almost to the point of like Tulsi Gabbard-esque.
Right.
But they tend to vote Republican more than they do Democrat.
Yeah.
So you kind of got a lot of those people that you're trying to coalesce together. And then on the same thing with the Democrats, you're seeing kind of your centrist. You see a lot of your far left leaning, kind of, you got your Palestine group, you've got your LGBTQ group over here, like all these different things. What faction, of the Republican Party do you see here most here in Rutherford County?
I think you've got a lot of more Bush type Republicans, truly. I think, and I would say, if you don't use that, the Bush term, maybe even more like just business minded Republicans who they care about the social issues, but I think they have an understanding, at least from the local level, and how the economy works and business works, and people living a quality life works. A lot of those social issues are not going to drive these issues, and so I think they want to say, well, let's focus and talk more about the economy and taxes and incentives so that we can continue to thrive and have a quality life. So I think that's what I've found, and obviously in this era of Trump, I mean, there's a lot of people in this community who are big Trump supporters, and so, but I think there's some overlap in those 2 groups as well. But there's also a lot of those Trump supporters are also kind of like, I guess, leftover like Tea Party folks as well, who are super anti-government and very conservative, what the media would call right wingers, which
Deplorables, maybe.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's a really good answer. Here's a question, and this is a completely personal question. If you want me to throw this out, by all means, we'll cut it out. Do you think that with the that George Bush style of conservatism that we see a lot here, because I would actually agree with you on that, do you think that's one of the reasons why our economy has been so successful here in Rutherford County and why we've been able to sustain the level of growth we have for the last 20 years? I mean, it's obviously, politics plays a role in everything.
Sure.
But, I mean, the amount of boom that we've experienced in the last 20 years is unprecedented for really a lot of places in the Southeast.
Yeah.
Especially a town that started off and was kind of where Murfreesboro is at for its first 150 years.
Mm-hmm. Well, so I would argue that a lot of that's been driven by the state. And I mean, we are one of the best run states in the United States. And I know everybody's like, well, he's, lifelong Tennessean. Of course, he's going to say that. But I think I got a really good vantage point when I worked for the NRA, because I traveled to 3 other states that I'd never spent a ton of time in. It was very, just because I was working on one issue, I was exposed to a lot of other issues that those states were dealing with and working on. And I was amazed at how far ahead we were than all of those other states, and how often those other legislatures, because inevitably, you go to dinner with some of these guys and they talk about Tennessee and how they are trying to do, we saw Tennessee do this, and so we're trying to do that. And so, we have been since 2010, when Governor Haslam was elected, and I guess he came in office in 2011. But the amount of things that Republicans have done to cut taxes, to cut red tape and bureaucracy at the state level, that is really what has driven the growth that we've seen in Nashville and then the greater Nashville area, which we're blessed to be a part of that growth here in Rutherford County. I mean, I've got a real estate client that is based out of LA. They've got offices. They're kind of in the distribution industrial space, and they're not in the Nashville area. They're wanting to get in the Nashville area. And one of the chief reasons that they want to come to Tennessee is because the good government, low taxes, great workforce. The list just goes on of why they want to be here. And that's the reason that you've seen Oracle and GM and Ford expand. And I should have brought the list. I'm like given the speech for the governor's ECD guys, but I think that's a lot of why we've been able to thrive. And obviously, we've had great leadership at the local level too, that has been able to partner with the state and making sure that continues to happen. So
that's a really good answer. I think there's that bringing in different companies and different employers obviously that always helps with growth, because when people move to a new place, they need a job, they need something to do, they need a purpose.
Yeah.
And a lot of people find their purpose in their work because that's what you do for a third of the day, sometimes more. It's
a little cliche, but I don't know if you've heard, our former Lieutenant Governor Ron Ramsey was, I think, kind of coined the phrase, "It matters who governs." Oh, yeah. And we have seen the great fruits of that for the past 14 to 15 years at the state level and at the local level. That's why, I care a lot about who's going to win in November for a whole lot of reasons. But I was having this conversation with a friend the other day, and I said, look, if Kamala were to win, I don't want that to happen, but the reality is, and we were kind of talking about this before we got started, I don't know how much that's going to change our daily lives. I really don't. And again, I am not at all saying it does not matter, because I care a whole lot about it. But, part of the whole reason that everybody's like, why in the world did you run for city council? And I think because of all the things that I've done, the more I have realized what happens at the local level matters a hell of a lot more than what's happening in Washington, D.C. and to some extent, Nashville, Tennessee. Mm-hmm. And so, but it's still, it matters a lot who governs and who you put in those seats. And that's why, to even go back to what we were talking about earlier, that's why I think it matters so much, the belief system behind the people that you elect to city council, to county commission, to mayor of the cities and the county where you're from, because that belief system is going to inform the decisions that they make.
Absolutely. Now, I always joke around with my wife. If I ever hear somebody say, if I ever go through a presidential campaign, I don't hear, this is the most important election of our lives. Right. That's when I'm packing up my bags. And I don't hear that. I am deeply concerned.
Yeah.
Because so I know this is kind of a loaded question here, but what, like, specifically, you don't have to be specific to Rutherford County, but, that's kind of what we're going for here. And like maybe you have businesses and things like that.
Sure.
You get a large company, say here in Rutherford County, you've got Tyson's, you've got Nissan.
Yeah.
You see it very similarly with how kind of unions work. Yeah. Unions are not supposed to be political organizations, yet they are massively involved in politics.
Yeah.
Maybe these companies aren't unionized. I know Nissan is, and I don't know about Tyson's. But, kind of your effects, what your supposed policies may affect on that business is going to play a role in who those people vote for. How does that work?
I mean, I think, one of the things that I tried to do when I was running for council was sit down with local business leaders, because a lot of times, obviously the decisions that are made at the city and county level can affect those businesses a great deal. Mm-hmm. And so I found that a lot of, and I'm trying to think off the top of my head, we've got a lot. I mean, you mentioned some of the large employers that we have kind of in the county, in the city. Obviously MTSU is a large employer, the city school system, the county school system. Those aren't necessarily businesses by the pure definition, I guess. But, I've made a point over the years to be active in the local chamber. I mean, there's a ton. You can meet so many people, and I've seen a lot of the chambers across the state, and I've told Kelly Beam and Paul Latour and a lot of those guys over there, Stephanie Brackman, that we have the best chamber in the state. I mean, bar none. We just do. They're extremely active in the community. There's always something going on. And a lot of that is we've been benefactors of the growth and the stuff we just talked about. But those people also have a lot of influence in the community when it comes to elections, because oftentimes somebody's going to come up to them and say, well, what do you think about this person? Or who are you voting for this? And even though they may not get out publicly in front and say, hey, go vote for, Matt Herriman or John Doe or whatever, they're still having a lot of private conversations.
Yeah.
And people ask and care about their opinion.
And that is their right, and they deserve that 100%.
Yeah.
So how much do federal elections influence local elections? I know we see they have a presidential election. They call it down ballot elections with the Senate and House of Representatives and all that. Do we see kind of the same effect with maybe a governor race or a mayor or anything like that? How does that all play in together?
So I think federal elections definitely have an effect on state level elections, but I think they have a less effect on local elections. And part of that is what we talked about kind of at the very beginning in practice. Local elections are held earlier in the year. Mm-hmm. They don't really match up with federal elections. They match up with, I guess, the state and federal primary here in Tennessee, because back in August we had the state level primary, the federal level primary. But because that's a primary and then it matches with a local general election, I feel like that also kind of keeps it from being super partisan on the local level. And so, but when it comes to federal versus state, I mean, there's an obvious, back in 2018, I think the gubernatorial race was a lot more, I guess, use the term federalized than previous gubernatorial races. And we could pontificate about why that was, but there was a ton of discussion about like immigration and building the wall and certain stuff like that, when Tennessee has no role in helping the federal government with border security.
I don't know. I would still call Tennessee Texas's big brother, but
Yes, absolutely.
there's a lot of people who moved here from Austin that are gonna be real upset to hear that, but I don't care. Davy Crockett is your daddy. So, what are some unique trends? I know we kind of talked about how we see kind of that George Bushian type Republicanism here a lot in Rutherford County, but what are some unique trends we see in Rutherford County? We talked earlier about how in 2016 Trump won a pretty big margin in the county, and that had slimmed down quite a bit in 2020. So that, we could call that a trend. What do we think is driving some of those changes?
I think some of it is people moving here from out of state that maybe don't align with, our historical policies, so to speak. Although I have found that a great deal of people moving in here are moving here, but same reasons a lot of the companies are moving here, because they like the politics and low tax state and so on and so forth. So it's hard to say. I think this election will be really interesting, this November election, to kind of, because you can't really say, a 10-point swing in 4 years is pretty large.
Yeah, especially at the county level.
Yeah, so it's hard to really understand, like, were there other factors in that? So I'm going to be really curious to see, does Trump do better than the 55-45? And if then it's like, well, is there a trend or is there not a trend? I'm not like a data scientist, but I do track some of those things. So I think, the city of Murfreesboro itself has become a little bit more purple over the past 5 or so years. And I don't know, I couldn't put, a button, so to speak, on exactly the reason for that. And I think a lot of it is we just had a ton of growth over the past 10 years. And so I think it's probably a mixed bag of why that's happened. And I think a lot of it also just depends on who the candidate is that's running, and whether the general voting public sees that person as kind of a, centrist, level-headed, like going to make good decisions kind of thing, or if they see him as an extremist. I think you're going to have very different outcomes in those scenarios.
Absolutely. So we're going to be closing down here in the next few minutes, but what are some different positions we have here in Rutherford County? Kind of one that stuck out to me a while back. I had never heard of a register of deeds until 2022. But what are some different things? Obviously, everybody knows mayor, sheriff, city council. What are some other things that we have that people may just not know? Hey, this is an elected position. This is important. We need to know who these people are.
Yeah, obviously, you mentioned a few. We've got a county commission, which is almost like the county level city council, so to speak. And so there's districts for that. I should know. I don't know. There's like 20 something, I think, county commissioners for Rutherford County, and those are a lot more local in the sense of like they may live in your neighborhood, like or within a few blocks
If they
of
have
you,
to be in that district,
because they're very small districts. So and those matter because the county commission ends up being broken into, just like the legislature. The legislature has all these different committees, and kind of structure. The county commission has those same, like they've got a health and education committee, and they've got a budget committee, and all these different things, a steering committee, and they're part of like making decisions that end up impacting our lives. For instance, the county commission essentially sets, the mayor, just like the governor proposes a budget to the legislature, the county mayor proposes a budget to the county commission, and ultimately they can scrap it or tweak, they have the latitude to do whatever because they're separate but equal branches of the local government. And so a lot of those decisions are important because that's how they're spending money. It's roads and bridges and education, which is a huge part of it.
That's something that's been in the news lately.
Been in the news a little bit. And then obviously, I mean, the school board, who we elect as school board, matters a great deal, because they are, you know, they are putting together a budget too that they kind of pitch to the county commission, and then they approve it. And so, you know, I think you've kind of hit on most of them. You know, city council, county commission, county mayor, city mayor, register of deeds. We have a county trustee. A lot of people may not know.
Is that like a comptroller, or what do they do?
A little bit, kind of like they essentially keep records too, but the county trustee essentially is in charge of like collecting money. So they'll send out, I guess they're more like a treasurer.
Okay.
So like Ted Beatty is our county trustee. So when you get your tax bill, it actually has his name on it, because he's the county trustee, because he's in charge of essentially collecting the taxes.
So the least popular man in the county right now.
Yes. Well, it's interesting. You know, so many people get blamed for taxes going up or down because, you know, his office sends out the tax bills. And then, of course, you've got Rob Mitchell, who's the county property assessor, who, you know, sends out all of these, you know, assessments, and you get these property value things from him. And so a lot of people want to blame him for how that, you know, the taxes going up or down, when it's really the county commission and the county mayor who sets the tax rate.
Absolutely.
So it's kind of interesting how that all works.
So when, so you kind of brought up how, you know, you've got the county mayor, the county commission. Is there a, you know, equally, you know, to that third end, is there a judicial part to that as well?
I mean, obviously, I don't think in the sense of like, we don't have like a county Supreme Court necessarily, but, you know, obviously we have a local judicial body that handles kind of our local civil and criminal cases.
Okay.
So they're, you know, and they would handle anything. We have a local district attorney, so I guess, you know, if there was something that ever went on at the county level, I'm trying to think. We have like a county attorney. It's honestly a good question I don't know the answer to. Like if you know, the county gets sued for something, I'm not sure who even represents the county, if it's the county attorney or if like the district attorney does. I know when the state gets sued, or if the state is suing, obviously the attorney general represents the state in that instance, and so maybe the local district attorney
that's
general.
such a cool thought to think about. As a lawyer, you know, you get to represent 6.5 million people.
Yeah,
and they're all cheering against the NCAA right now.
Yes, that's right.
I don't know if you saw the stuff with Tennessee and Virginia.
Absolutely. Yeah,
that was the first time I felt represented in a long time.
That's good.
Well, Matt, I appreciate you coming in. Thank you so much. Your experience, your wisdom, sharing all that with us. I hope I certainly learned a lot more in just doing my research for this. You know, this has been fascinating and really, really eye-opening, and getting to learn from your perspective, a firsthand perspective, and who's been both on the campaigning side and then actually been a candidate. This is fascinating. And thank you for your time.
Thanks, Phil. Appreciate you.
Yep. Thank you for listening to another episode of How It All Works podcast. You can find us on any major podcast network. We're also on YouTube. Smash that follow, smash that like button, smash that subscribe button. We'll see you on the next one.